I am getting married, very happy, and today is Bachelorette night!
The evening was meant to be one of the most joyful of her life. Pay attention to the lady in the center on what should have been the happiest night of her life. The bride-to-be was surrounded by laughter and celebration at her bachelorette party, blissfully unaware of the darkness lurking just outside her door. Little did they know, this would be the last time they would be seen together. Amanda Harris, a young woman on the brink of marriage, was enjoying the final celebration of her single life. Surrounded by friends and laughter, the apartment buzzed with the excitement of a bachelorette party. Music played from the corner of the room, and her closest friends filled the air with light-hearted conversation and jokes. But unbeknownst to Amanda, a dark shadow had arrived, one that threatened to shatter her world. Outside, hidden in the night's darkness, stood her ex-boyfriend, Robert Marks, his knuckles white with tension, his face, twisted with resentment and obsession, was set with grim determination. The night was about to take an unexpected, and Robert had been watching from the shadows, waiting for his moment to strike. Inside the apartment, the atmosphere was far removed from the impending danger. Amanda, clad in a pink party dress and adorned with a sparkling tiara, basked in the glow of her friends' laughter. Unaware of the presence outside, she was wrapped up in the excitement of the celebration. The air smelled of perfume and champagne, the soundtrack of her final night of freedom before marriage. But everything was about to change. The knock on the door was soft, barely noticeable against the lively hum of the party. But Amanda, feeling an odd tug in her chest, moved toward the door. When she opened it, she froze. There stood Robert, an unexpected and unwelcome figure. For a brief moment, their eyes met, and the joy that once filled the room seemed to drain away. Robert's expression was cold and unreadable. "What do you want?" Amanda's voice quivered, her heart pounding in her chest. Robert said nothing, only lifting his hand to reveal the Glock hidden behind his back. Without another word, he reached forward and grabbed her wrist, pulling her out of the apartment, his grip tight and unyielding. The celebration continued inside, unaware of the horror unfolding just beyond the door. Amanda's friends remained unaware for the next few minutes. Inside the apartment, the music still played, and the chatter carried on, oblivious to the nightmare outside. But something was wrong. The laughter had faded, and an unsettling silence settled over the space. It wasn't until a few minutes later, around 10:20 p.m., that a bridesmaid, Marie, wandered toward the kitchen. She noticed a draft coming from the hallway and found the front door ajar. Frowning, she called out for Amanda, assuming she had stepped outside for a moment. No response. "Amanda?" she called again, louder this time, her voice tinged with concern. One of the other guests, sensing something was off, asked for the music to be turned down. The sudden stillness made the tension palpable, and Marie walked to the door. Peering into the hallway, she saw nothing but the dark, empty corridor. She checked Amanda's bedroom and the bathroom, but both were empty. Then her gaze fell upon something that made her stomach drop. On the granite countertop in the kitchen, next to an untouched plate of snacks, lay Amanda's phone, her purse, and her car keys. These were the things a person never leaves behind, especially not voluntarily. Her heart skipped a beat. Something was horribly wrong. It was 10:50 p.m. when the first 911 call was placed. Marie's voice trembled as she spoke to the dispatcher. explaining that her friend, the bride-to-be, was missing from her own bachelorette party. The dispatcher immediately flagged it as a high-priority welfare check. As the remaining guests tried to process what had happened, another call was placed to Amanda's fiancé, Tyler Jameson. Tyler was at a nearby event in Tempe, but upon hearing the news, he rushed to her apartment. Within 30 minutes, he arrived at the building, just as the first police patrol car pulled into the gate. The officers arrived and quickly entered apartment 214. The scene inside was a stark contrast to the chaos unfolding outside. The celebration decorations and food stood, abandoned, like a ghost of what was meant to be a night of joy. A sense of panic had begun to settle over the guests. As officers separated the witnesses to gather statements, they began to piece together the alarming situation. The front door was still wide open. The items left behind on the counter confirmed something was wrong, and the absence of Amanda was now undeniable. They were facing more than a missing person. They were facing a potential crime scene. At 11:30 p.m., Tyler gave officers a physical description of Amanda. She was healthy, with no known medical issues. But when asked about any potential threats to her, Tyler's face grew pale as he uttered the name of her ex-boyfriend, Robert Marks. Tyler explained the nature of their troubled past, the harassment, the constant texts, and the restraining order Amanda had filed against Robert just over a year ago. This immediately raised alarm bells for the officers. The name Robert Marks was quickly cross-referenced in their system, and the search for Amanda intensified. Meanwhile, building security footage was reviewed, and what the officers saw would haunt them. At exactly 10:15 p.m., the camera footage from the hallway revealed a chilling scene. Robert, dressed in dark clothing, stood outside the door, speaking to Amanda in a tense exchange. Then, in a move that made everything clear, he grabbed Amanda by the wrist and forcefully pulled her out of the apartment. This wasn't just a missing person case. It was an armed abduction. The police quickly escalated their efforts. A search of state and local databases revealed Robert Marks' disturbing criminal history. He had violated his restraining order multiple times and had just been released from prison after serving time for the same offense. His release from jail in July 2021 had come with strict conditions, no contact with Amanda. But now, it was clear that those conditions had been violated. As the search grew more urgent, Amanda's phone was taken for forensic analysis, and the bridesmaids shared critical details. For the past 3 weeks, Amanda had been receiving disturbing messages from an unknown number. They referenced unfinished business and hinted at regret. The messages had come from a prepaid phone, and at first Amanda had brushed them off. But now, the significance was undeniable. The police, however, had made another breakthrough. They found something alarming on social media. 2 of Amanda's friends had posted Instagram stories earlier in the evening, tagging the apartment complex. After some digging, they uncovered a fake account that had been created months earlier, one that followed only Amanda and a few select others. The account's IP address traced back to Robert Marks' home in Casa Grande. By 2 a.m., a BOLO, Be on the Lookout alert, was broadcast across central Arizona. Robert Marks was now officially a suspect in the abduction of Amanda Harris. The alert also provided the description of his car, a 2016 Ford Mustang, and listed him as armed and dangerous. Within minutes, the Scottsdale Police Department's traffic cameras captured a hit on Marks's vehicle heading east on a major freeway. Investigators tracked the car's route, moving further from the city center and toward the rugged, isolated areas outside of Phoenix. Marks was heading into the wilderness, where the search for Amanda would soon become far more difficult. At 11:55 p.m., a gas station in the small town of Sunflower caught sight of the vehicle. Surveillance footage from the gas station showed Robert Marks pulling up to the pump. Amanda was in the passenger seat, motionless. She didn't move, didn't speak. She sat in silence, staring blankly ahead. The video was disturbing. It was the last known sighting of Amanda Harris. The search now turned to the wilderness, the sprawling desert that would prove to be a treacherous maze for investigators. The vast expanse of the Tonto National Forest became the focus of the search as helicopters, ground units, and canine teams scoured the area. For days, the search turned up nothing. The wilderness swallowed them whole, offering no clues, no sign of life. Then nearly 5 days later, a breakthrough. The vehicle was found. But it wasn't enough. Robert was in custody, but Amanda was still out there, alone and lost. Time was running out, and the search had to intensify. This was just the beginning of a chilling story, one that would unfold over the following days in ways no one could have predicted. As the hours stretched into days, the search for Amanda Harris had turned into a desperate race against time. While law enforcement scoured the Tonto National Forest, the wilderness seemed to swallow any traces of Amanda's presence. The landscape, a dense, unforgiving maze of pines, steep cliffs, and narrow ravines, made the search exceedingly difficult. With Robert Marks now in custody, the investigation had shifted from an active manhunt to a full-scale search and rescue mission. The officers knew that Amanda had been alone in the wild for at least 2 days. Hypothermia, dehydration, and the lack of food had become the primary concerns for the search teams. Every hour that passed meant the odds of finding her alive grew slimmer. The entire area had been marked off, and specialized teams were deployed. Air support, K-9 units, and even volunteers who came from far and wide, hoping to make a difference. But despite their efforts, nothing concrete was found. Not a single sign of Amanda. The temperatures had dropped significantly in the mountainous terrain, especially at night. It was getting colder, and with every passing day the sense of urgency grew. The air was filled with a chilling silence, broken only by the sound of helicopter blades and the occasional bark of a search dog. The searchers pushed forward, working from sunrise to sunset, hoping for a breakthrough. It wasn't until Thursday morning, October 21st, that a glimmer of hope emerged. A U.S. Forest Service ranger, conducting a routine patrol deep in the forest, noticed something out of place. His sharp eyes caught sight of a vehicle partially hidden behind a cluster of trees. It was a black 2016 Ford Mustang, and as the ranger ran the plates, his heart sank. It was Robert Marks' car. The car was abandoned, cold, and unoccupied. No signs of life, except for the eerie absence of Amanda. The discovery of the vehicle in the woods was crucial. It meant that both Robert and Amanda were on foot now. It also raised the terrifying possibility that they could be anywhere in the vast, rugged wilderness. The vehicle offered no answers, but it did provide a starting point for the next phase of the search. The search perimeter had to be redrawn. What had once been a broad net of speculation was now focused on a smaller, targeted area around Woods Canyon Lake. Within minutes, a tactical redeployment was put into effect. Roadblocks were set up to contain any possible escape route, and the air was filled with the hum of helicopters scanning the terrain below for any signs of life. The search had turned from a methodical search for a vehicle to a dangerous manhunt. Every step taken by the searchers brought them closer to finding Robert and his victim, but every moment that passed without a discovery weighed heavier on everyone involved. That afternoon, as the search continued, a canine unit led the way. The dog, trained to track human scent, had picked up a trail not far from the abandoned vehicle. The searchers followed, moving deeper into the forest, their hopes reigniting with every step. Then, just as the sun began to set, a deputy on foot patrol spotted movement. The officer stopped dead in his tracks and observed a figure, an armed man sitting against a large boulder. It was Robert Marks. He was clearly exhausted, disoriented, and dehydrated. His clothes were filthy, covered in dirt and grime from days spent in the wilderness. A .38 caliber revolver was visible in his waistband. He seemed completely defeated, surrounded by officers who had been waiting for this moment. Robert Marks made no attempt to flee. Instead, he sat there, offering no resistance when they approached. The officers ordered him to the ground, and as he complied, they secured the weapon from his waistband. Robert, looking up at the officers, gave no sign of defiance. He was subdued, physically and mentally. However, there was something even more chilling in his silence. His hands were empty, but his expression was empty too. He said nothing, not a word. As Robert was taken into custody, the search teams were immediately redirected. The forest had given up the man who had abducted Amanda, but it had not given up the woman he had taken. With Robert in custody, the focus once again shifted to finding Amanda. At 3 p.m., the search shifted into full-scale mode. The search perimeter was focused, laser-sharp now. The forest had already given up its most elusive piece, Robert Marks, but it still held Amanda's fate. Law enforcement, including the county sheriff's deputies and Arizona Department of Public Safety rangers, increased their efforts, continuing to comb through the rugged terrain. Their task was now even more urgent, with the knowledge that Amanda had been alone in the forest for nearly 48 hours. The helicopter scanned the area with thermal imaging, looking for heat signatures. Ground teams worked tirelessly, their eyes searching through dense vegetation, under rocks, and in hollow tree trunks, calling out for Amanda, hoping for a faint response. The wilderness had consumed all but one crucial piece of evidence: the abandoned car, which gave them the knowledge of her last known location. But that wasn't enough. As the hours stretched on, the searchers were left with nothing but the darkness of the forest, thick with its natural stillness. It wasn't until late Thursday afternoon that the breakthrough finally came. A ground team, working nearly 4 miles from the last confirmed sighting of Robert's car, noticed something unusual. One of the K9 units became fixated on a dense cluster of ponderosa pine trees. The searcher moved in cautiously, pushing through thick underbrush. There, partially obscured by branches and leaves, he saw a flash of pink. It was Amanda's clothing. Amanda was alive. She was huddled on the forest floor, shivering uncontrollably. Her lips were blue, and her body was racked with the tremors of severe hypothermia. The searchers quickly radioed in for help. Paramedics were dispatched immediately, and an airlift was arranged. It was a race against time now. Amanda had survived, but for how much longer? As the paramedics arrived, they confirmed that Amanda was alive but severely dehydrated and hypothermic. She was conscious but unable to speak coherently. The ordeal had taken its toll on her body, but there were no signs of physical assault, no visible injuries, no signs of struggle. But her mind and body had been pushed to the brink. As Amanda was treated and prepared for her extraction, investigators began piecing together the events of the past 5 days. After being airlifted to safety and stabilized, Amanda Harris provided investigators with a full account of her ordeal. She explained that Robert had contacted her repeatedly, threatening her fiancé and her friends if she didn't speak with him. On the night of her bachelorette party, Robert had arrived, demanding she come outside. She had been terrified. Fearing for her friends, she had opened the door, hoping to reason with him. But once she did, Robert grabbed her and forced her into the car. The drive had been long and erratic. Robert alternated between apologies and wild accusations, begging her to leave her life behind and run away with him. When they reached the remote area near Woods Canyon Lake, Robert became paranoid and eventually told Amanda to walk into the woods and wait while he figured things out. Terrified, Amanda complied. She was left alone, with no food, no water, and no jacket to protect her from the elements. Robert, having used her as his emotional pawn, simply walked away, leaving her behind. On February 2nd, 2022, Robert Mark faced justice for the terrifying events he had inflicted on Amanda. The case was overwhelming. Surveillance footage, digital evidence, and Amanda's own testimony formed the foundation of the prosecution's case. As the charges of kidnapping and aggravated assault were read aloud, Cruz accepted a plea deal, guilty to the crimes he had committed. He was sentenced to 18 years in prison for his actions. But for Amanda, the pain of the event was not so easily erased. She and her fiancé, Tyler Nichols, ended their engagement in December 2021. The emotional scars of the abduction were too much to bear, and Amanda relocated out of state, seeking solace and distance from the place where her life had been forever altered. The haunting memory of the night she was taken, the fear, and the isolation in the wilderness would never leave her, and the promise of a life with Tyler, once filled with hope, was forever shattered.